All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to another blind whiskey review here on Drums and Drams. My name's Cameron, and today I wanted to give you guys just a quick sneak peek at the beginning of this video of what's going on with this blind sample box. So let me tilt it up here. You guys can take a look at just how many samples I have to get through between now and the end of 2025. And you know how this works. Like, usually I reach my hand over, this box is just out of frame, and I'm pulling blind samples out. But I realized that you guys never get the chance to see just how many samples are in here. So I think there's probably like 50 or 60 whiskeys left to be tasted in 2025. But I think what I might have to do is like pull out all of the duplicate samples that are in this box, which are whiskeys like Birthday Bourbon or Four Roses LE, things that I've already tasted on the channel unblind that I thought I would love to taste blind as well and compare my ratings, you know, between those two tastings. I probably don't have time to do that. And so I haven't pulled them out yet. I could still pull a sample right now in this video, which is what I'm gonna do right now. I could still pull a duplicate sample that I've already taken a look at. I don't know, but I figured I would show you guys what's going on here in any case. And so I've got 4 random samples in my hands. I'm just gonna drop one off here, put the other ones back in the box. So I'm trying to pull a few samples at a time just to show you that it's 100% random. So let me go ahead and pour this out. And this whiskey looks pretty freaking dark. Even in the sample bottle, this is B255146. Wow, look at the color on this thing. What are we dealing with today? This is crazy. It's like, it's got that dark ruby red tint to it. So again, blind review, nose palate finish, rating out of 100. And then at the end of the video, I will find out what it is by checking out one of these reveal cards, which corresponds to the number on the sample. So give me just a second to find that reveal card. We're gonna make a hard cut right now. And I forgot to do this a second ago, but I will put a reminder along the bottom of the screen now, just in case I didn't put it in the title or the thumbnail of the video. But again, very dark. I've coated my glass. Now I'm excited to get into this. So let's check it out on the nose now and see what we get. All right, guys, so I've got to be honest with you, just from the outset here, this smells like an incredibly special whiskey on the nose. I'm getting all sorts of like chocolate forward and dark fruit forward notes, almost like chocolate covered raisin, and even like chocolate covered espresso bean, because there's a bittersweet coffee chocolate combination here, like really dark, you know, high cacao percentage, you know, baker's chocolate or whatever, and also this coffee thing. And for me, like any of these notes, when you have like an oaky, chocolatey, coffee kind of profile, like that reminds me of my favorite whiskey of all time, which is super old Heaven Hill, whether it's the Oakley sourced single barrels, the 20-year stuff, or Willet Purple Tops, or Heaven Hill 17, like any of those things, even William Heaven Hill 19 this year, any of those whiskeys that have like a ton of that like fudgy, brownie, chocolate, coffee, oak combination, like that just does something for me. And this whiskey has so much of that on the nose. It's like the first thing that you notice. The color makes a lot of sense when you smell it. It doesn't smell like it's double barreled. It doesn't smell, doesn't smell necessarily crafty. Like maybe there's something going on here. Small barrel, heirloom grain, pot still, like maybe one little aspect of this whiskey is crafty in some way. But overall, when I see this color and then you smell the whiskey and you get all those darker notes, the chocolates, the dark fruits, the coffees, everything kind of tracks. And again, like for me on the nose, my mind is already in, at least for my rating scale, like the 90 point range, which is huge. Like for me, 90 to 95 is epically good whiskey. And then when you get 96 to 100, it's like best of all time. But when I smell this, I'm immediately reminded of some of my favorite whiskeys from this year so far. So this is a great first impression. I'm gonna keep digging in now on the nose. Okay, so as I keep digging in here on the nose, what I'm starting to pick up on now is a little bit of like a tangy component to the whiskey. It's almost like, I don't know if this makes any sense. It's like orange and raspberry together, but sour. So I don't know exactly what that is. If that's like some combination, like, you know, strawberry lemonade, that exists, but orange raspberry, I don't feel like that necessarily exists as a flavor combo, but it's like this sort of sour, citrusy, and sour berry kind of note. And overall, I think for me, as I get used to the chocolate, coffee, dark fruit notes, the sourness starts to stand out. And also there's a little bit of like this herbal bitterness on the nose. And I'm not sure if it's because maybe this is some sort of rye whiskey, or again, like I noticed on the first nosing, there's maybe a small aspect of this that feels craft. And I'm starting to get more of that as I continue to nose it, and it's coming off now in almost like this somewhat bitter herbal way. So I don't know exactly what I'm dealing with here. I would love to keep spending more time on the nose, but I've got to get this thing on the palate. It smells intense, smells like it's gonna be a pretty high proof point. Color suggests that as well, so here we go, cheers. Wow, holy crap. The palate of this whiskey takes you on a ride. Up front, very, very intense, like nutmeg and clove, you know, these very intense spices, almost like chai spice in a way. It is extremely gripping, not necessarily dry on the front of the palate, but it's just a humongous ramp up of spice. You know, you get a lot of that chocolate and a lot of that coffee and a lot of that oak at the beginning as well. Now, as it kind of develops, as you get into the mid palate, there is like this juicy component to the whiskey. Like I talked about on the nose, I started to get more of this orange and raspberry thing, and that does come through, and the sourness actually comes through as well. I called it like tangy. It's got this little tanginess in the mid palate, but then as you get into the finish, the whiskey does turn a little dry for me, and it's dry in the way that sometimes I talk about, where it's like you took a spoonful of cinnamon, you know, you ate a spoonful of cinnamon and it just dries your mouth out. And no, I'm not encouraging you to do the cinnamon challenge or whatever that is. I've never done that myself, but I imagine that if you ate a spoonful of cinnamon, it would probably feel like this, where it just completely dries your mouth out. And it's like this kind of gritty texture in the finish as well. And that's also where, you know, as I'm talking through it, as I'm talking through the finish right now, that herbal bitterness that started to, you know, make itself known on the nose, that's really present now in the finish. It's almost like I drank an IPA and I've got that like that hoppy, like resinous sort of green type taste. And that's what I thought might have been a rye component on the nose. I don't think this is a rye whiskey. I would be very shocked if this ends up being a rye whiskey, but it just has that kind of like herbaceous, hoppy thing in the finish. I don't love that. And I think that some people might like it because it adds a little complexity and it's a totally different flavor to an otherwise, you know, chocolate coffee bomb of a whiskey with some fruit. For me, I think it's a little out of place, and I also don't love the dryness of the finish. But all that said, talking through this first sip, which was an intense first sip, I'm still very impressed by this whiskey. And I'm still thinking high 80s or maybe even low 90s as a rating. I just want to see how this does on a second sip, if I'm going to keep building on that bitterness in the finish. Let's go back in now for a second sip. I'm telling you guys, the front of this palate is one of the best front palate experiences I've had on a whiskey all year. Like seriously, 94, 95 out of 100 kind of experience for the first, I would even say first half of that sip. You know what? Honestly, the bitterness has gone away a little bit from those kind of like herbal notes that I talked about and that little tinge of crafty. And now it's really like a coffee finish. So still bittersweet with emphasis on the bitter part in the finish, but instead of it being resinous and hoppy and green, now it's just a freaking coffee bomb. And I do like that. And it's a little less dry now that my palate's used to it after that first sip. You go to a second sip, the dryness doesn't take over as much. I think this is a very, very good whiskey. It's confusing because I don't know if it's actually as old as the first half of the palate is making me think it is, because the back end of the palate makes me think maybe it's not quite as old. But either way, it's a flavor bomb. It might not be for everybody. I think it could be a little bit of a divisive profile if you don't like coffee, if you don't like this much chocolate in your whiskey. Like it almost has like a chocolate malt kind of note to it. And maybe that's what I mean when I'm talking about this crafty, slightly crafty influence here. I think this is fantastic, and I'm gonna rate this a 91 out of 100. So it's a very big score, and one of the highest scores, you know, that I've probably given this year, probably top 5, top 10 type material. Got a lot of samples to go through, obviously. So there's gonna be more in the 90s, I'm sure, but let's find out what this is, and we'll do a quick debrief here. All right, what do we have? Wow, okay. So, actually, you know what? I just mentioned this chocolate malt thing on that last sip, and this makes a lot of sense. So, Woodford Reserve Chocolate Whisper Redux. I'm trying to like think back to this bottle because this was so many months ago that this came out. I think the proof on this is really high, and you've already seen it on the screen. I think it's like in the 130s, like high 130s, like 138, 139. And I feel like the age on this bottle was also really high. I feel like it was an age-stated Woodford, like 12 years old is what comes to mind. Anyways, again, you've seen it on the screen. I don't need to keep like wondering about it right now. But the point is, this did have something to do with them using chocolate malt in their production process at one point. And when I first tasted this whiskey, I definitely noticed the heavy chocolate, heavy coffee going on in here. And I guess the craftiness kind of makes sense too, right? Because of the chocolate malt, Woodford does always have a little bit of that pot still note in there too. So I think my experience with this whiskey and this blind tasting does make a lot of sense. I don't know that I would have even remembered about this bottle, you know? Like, some of these bottles are so old now in this blind sample box. But 91 out of 100, I guess I wouldn't have imagined that I would have gone this high on it. If I thought back to my experience, I would have said, yeah, probably high 80s. But I will stand by the fact that I think this is probably a little bit of a divisive bottle. If you don't like a lot of chocolate, you don't like a lot of coffee in your whiskey, this one might be a challenge for you. But I think for me, just how massive that drinking experience is, and also if you gave it to somebody blind, you don't tell them it's Woodford, you don't tell them it has chocolate malt. I think if people put this next to some things like, I hate to say this year's George T. Stagg, and they had it totally blind and they weren't influenced by the brand or the grain usage in here or whatever it is. I think even if it wasn't a different grain, it was at least ran on the same stills that ran that grain. I don't know. I'm just rambling at this point. But if you put this next to something like a GTS from this year or like a Bowman Batch 4 cask strength and other like high octane heavy hitters, I think a lot of people are going to choose this bottle over those. And I think me personally, I would probably choose it even with its, you know, little flaws, little extra bitterness here and there. I think it's an outstanding whiskey. So that's going to do it, guys. I hope this wasn't a clunky review. I feel like it was a little clunky. But anyways, I'll see you guys soon. Like, comment, subscribe. Cheers, and I'll see you next time here on Drums and Drams.